Hello, everyone. Welcome to the 60th episode of the Spiritual Brainstorm. In this video, I'd like to discuss higher vibrations. It's a term that you hear a lot in the esoteric and spiritual realms and circles, but I feel that it's a bit misunderstood, and I'd like to sort of clarify what it actually means and remove the positive, negative kind of connotation. So, the two or three last videos were kind of more boring, I guess, because they were more introspective. And I was kind of talking about my own personal therapy rather than discussing the universe. But I feel that it was a really necessary step for me because lo and behold, I was kind of out of ideas. And now that I'm done, kind of, well, not done, but that I've really acknowledged the fact that there is some personal work and some personal consciousness growth that you need to undergo in order to go further in your understanding, then suddenly it sort of unlocks new levels or of understanding and new topics to discuss, new revelations. Um, so it's really a two-part job. Let's say it's not just about um, pulling in all this information from infinity, but there is definitely some work to do on the inside to evolve from within, to go in and really work on your personal fears, your personal problems, because otherwise you might find yourself overwhelmed or not really aligned in the truths that you're actually accessing. And so let me just be very schematic here. Let's zoom in. Let's say that there is a center point that is a singularity that takes the form of a circle that is infinitely dense in its information. That is, its vibrations, but so dense that it actually is a point. It's vibrating so quickly, and it's just one dot. Say this is a singularity where all the information is condensed. And this information contains everything. It's, you could call it God source, God source. And its qualities is, of course, um, omnipotence, omniscience, because the consciousness that is associated with this information is actually instantly aware of all that it is. Now, as you zoom out, the problem is most people think that God, because he's omnipotent, or she, whatever, is omnipotent, omniscient, then God sort of knows what's going to happen. But what most people don't understand, I think, is that when you are omnipotent and omniscient and you know everything, you have to realize that in everything, there is everything and its opposite. So when you know and you are aware of everything, then you are also aware of nothing. It's the same. So I'll give you a few examples. Imagine if you know that the sky is blue, but of course, in infinity, there's no reason why the sky would just be blue. There are probably an infinite versions of planet Earth where the sky is every single color you could think of. Because why wouldn't it be? Because if you can imagine it to be any other color, then it surely is in some other parallel reality. And so when you know that the sky is every single possible color, it is the same as not knowing what color the sky is. Because if it's all colors, then it's the same as if it's not no color. And so, in order to actually know anything, you have to know something without knowing something else. The reason why we know the sky is blue is because we don't know that it is pink, or we don't know that it is red. And that's something very difficult to sort of wrap our heads around, because there are even more ridiculous examples. For instance, how would God know what would happen, what is going to happen when every single second of your life you have committed suicide? That is um, because everything that is ever possible, that could have ever happened, there's also a parallel timeline or a parallel universe where every second of your life you died in some way or another. And at the same time, you didn't. And so, how do you untangle that? How can you know what will happen? The only way you know what will happen is from the relative vantage point, where because you invent yourself a certain past, you can hallucinate a certain future. Otherwise, you're lost in infinity. But let's get back on topic. I was wanted to address something very important, which is higher vibrations. And that's because most people associate that with something positive. And I'd like to demystify that a bit. So, how does the singularity then goes about experiencing itself? So, from this infinitely dense point where all the information is condensed, imagine if it expands out. And if you stretch that infinitely dense circle wide enough, then it creates a sort of a very, very large circle, infinitely large, where the information is more spread out. And so, from a certain perspective, this is the lowest vibration of all, which is sound, and which is the Ohm sound, the initial sound of the universe, because it's just pure sound. That is all the information that can be contained in it is just sound. It's the basic. It's like there's nothing that you can build on top of that. It's like the ones and zeros in your hexadecimal code, where there is no higher language built on top of it. Just pure raw data with no meaning associated. Just sound. And then imagine if that singularity, that consciousness, then creates little bubbles of consciousness that wrap around certain parts of this sound, and they start interacting with each other. And once they've found a harmonious way of interacting, they create the photon, which is basically a black hole where vibrations are arranged in such a way that they interact in harmony with each other and don't cancel each other out. And that creates a new layer, a new layer of experience where there's more information condensed into this one point. It's like a compression of the information. So the photon, you could say, is higher vibration. But it's not necessarily better than sound. It's not necessarily less evil or whatever. It's only more information. It can There's more information that can be packed inside a photon. And here I think the number 12 is really important, or 11, 11, 12. It's referring to the notes of music and octaves, which is what I believe the kind of layers that you find, the intermediary layers that you find between each major layer, each major step. And these layers need to be harmonized in order to reach a new level. So um, let's just bring this logic a little bit closer to us. And here, let's imagine that we have the level of the living cell. And that's one layer where, here you have the star is one portal. And then another and more condensed information is the living cell. And an even more condensed information is the human being. And you can see that basically the only thing that really changes as we get higher in vibration, quote unquote, is just more information. And with more information condensed and the consciousness associated to process that information, the more it resembles the singularity and its characteristics of omnipotence, omniscience. Obviously, humans have more influence over reality than living cells. And living cells have more influence over reality than, let's say a photon or something. So it's the closer you sort of get to the singularity, as time advances, not in a linear fashion, but in a logical fashion, where simply you get closer and closer to the center of the black hole, and your reality becomes more and more complex because there's simply more and more information. It's more and more dense in information. The more your reality gets closer to resemble the singularity. Now, um, one thing that I wanted to discuss is all this 5G, for instance, controversy. 5G also is a symbol for more information. You can transmit much more information through 5G networks. That is the whole point. But why is it bad, quote unquote, or nefarious or seen as bad? That is because, contrary to the common belief that higher vibrations are better, higher vibrations just mean more information. And that also means that depending on your subjective level of consciousness, more information can either kill you or help you. I'll give you a very concrete example. It's much better to have a very primitive society with low information, for instance, here, like savages, low info and being low vibration, quote unquote, but with a very high level of consciousness, that is a very high ability to harmonize what little information is accessible to you, than to be in a higher vibrational state somewhere here with a lot of information, but a very low consciousness in how to harmonize that information. What does it mean? For instance, you give people that are quote unquote in a high vibrational environment with more information, but that have a low level of consciousness. So the easy example is giving Hitler a 200 megaton atomic weapon with as a rocket that he can fire upon any place on Earth. How do you think that story would have ended? Probably not very well. So that high-level thermonuclear nuclear weapon is just a form that you give to more information or more complexity, more information. And that more information can translate into more technology, more sophisticated technology, or it could be, shooting laser beams from your eyes. It doesn't actually matter in what form it takes. It just means more information, more complexity, um, more rich experiences. But and the form that that takes in your reality depends on your belief system. So because our belief system right now is predominantly materialist science, then it's going to manifest as like very powerful weapons or technology. But that's just because of, the way that we are structured, the way that we evolved in our belief system. Another alien race, it could be, very sophisticated telekinesis powers or whatever. It's just basically the power over reality is much bigger. You hold more information. It's much better, for instance, to be a very primitive society with like this rudimentary tools, like just basic plows and stuff, but understanding harmony, how to harmonize that, and like finding harmony and balanced way of interacting with each other peacefully, and living in that quote unquote low vibrational environment, then to be completely irresponsible and having found no harmony in how you interact with other humans and being in a high vibrational environment. Now, why do some people still say that low vibration is bad and high vibration is good? It is because there is an inherent filter, natural filter at every step, major step here, that creates a form of natural barrier for evil, or bad things in the lower layers to permeate and go through to the next layer. What do I mean by this? Well, let's run a thought experiment. Like I said, if you imagine an alien, like a civilization like ours, that is more and more in a high vibrational or more information environment, and receives more and more complex information about how to, interact and have technology and whatever, but their consciousness level is very low, they will end up self-destructing inevitably. So for us it would have been something like nuclear apocalypse or something like that, or climate change, like pushing, just completely depleting the resources of the earth. um, Inevitably, if your consciousness and your way of interacting with others, the other elements in your reality, does not attain a certain harmony, then as you advance towards a higher vibrational environment, you're going to end up self destructing regardless. But it also means that in the lower vibrational levels, you do find very harmful or primitive, um, um, sort of civilizations, because since they're in a low information environment, even if they don't behave in a very harmonious way, they will not be able to self destruct. So if you have somebody that's a real savage, but their only tools they have, because they're in a low vibrational environment, is clubs, so just basically sticks, they won't be able to bludgeon themselves to death with those. So you will find that's why we label low vibration as being bad, is because at every layer here, when you're closer to the lower vibration in each of these layers, that's where you'll find the most negative beings, because the higher up you go, the more likely they will self-destruct anyways. So what do you find here, for instance, like let's say in particles? Here you find little hydrogen atoms that refuse to fuse into a star and bump into each other chaotically and create a sort of permanent thermonuclear reaction by colliding into each other violently. And that's what I would call the primordial hell, sort of permanent destructive fire, um, that burns forever, because you have in that sort of realm, or in that sort of dimension or layer, all the elements that refused to interact in harmony and become a star here and interact in harmony, and therefore they are the disharmonious um, creatures, or beings, or elements, if you will, of that layer. And there is a sort of a hell, a customized hell for each of those, that is always found at the bottom layer of at the bottom of each of these layers, at the lower vibrational levels. So that's why, for instance, here at the lower vibrational level, in terms of aliens, you will find reptilians or other quote unquote evil alien races. They have achieved a level of harmony enabling their civilization to interact with themselves in a harmonious level, but not with other civilizations. So they are in the low vibration, but still a very much higher vibrational layer than we are. So there is this kind of, like I said, there's always this kind of filter where you at least have to find out how to interact harmoniously with all the elements in your reality, direct experience, and direct level, before you can go to the higher level. And so the reason why 5G, for instance, takes a negative form in our reality is simply because we individually, every single human, hasn't done enough work in raising their own consciousness to integrate more information or higher vibrations in a positive way. And so the real way to solve this, the problem with 5G, is for everyone to do some kind of internal work of raising their own consciousness. Because ultimately, that's the only way that you can manage to navigate um, a a world which we're inevitably entering, where we're bombarded with more and more information, or higher and higher vibrations. And so yeah, it's this balance between your internal ability um, to harness more information and high vibrations in a positive way. Let me give you another image. It's as if first you start with a quartet, like a violin, viola, cello, and bass, or maybe like two violins, one viola, and one cello. And if you can find harmony between those, then you get promoted to playing in an orchestra. And an orchestra, there's much more information in an orchestra than in a quartet. Here, there's only four voices and only four musicians. So it's a bit easier to achieve harmony than in an orchestra. And if you cannot even manage to find harmony as a quartet, then don't even try. You're not even like qualified. And the only way that you can do that is not to sort of blame other players of the quartet. It's just for you to practice on playing your instrument better. And then as you get better, then you can go back to playing in the quartet, and you will actually help the others by helping yourself. And that's the whole idea of people to shine their light, to um, to yeah, to be a beacon of light or an example, um, in raising their own consciousness to help the others, um, you know, bring in all this higher information, this more information that is just available as we enter higher vibrational realms in a way that is positive for humanity. So in the video that I've just posted, I've explained that if you look at the World Economic Forum website, for instance, they are clearly moving into a world where an AI plus some elites control all of the assets, the houses, the public transport, and then they decide what is better for humanity, where the little humans, the masses, which are deemed to be not an elite or stupid, then are allocated in real time whatever assets or resources these people decide. And the reason why we're heading into that kind of is because of the beliefs we hold on the inside about our own bodies. That we think that the intelligence is only in the brain, and then all the other cells are just dumb cells that obey the commands of the brain. Whereas a more a higher understanding of the body is that every single part of the body has its own intelligence, and that we cannot just project this kind of simplistic understanding of how our body works, especially, for instance, in research resources distribution, because it's really a magical phenomenon that when you run, the energy spontaneously flows to your legs seamlessly, because there is no real command center that dispatches that. It's just that your heart makes more resources available, and it's as if the cells in your legs sort of knew that they need to pool more resources because of what you're doing spontaneously, and then and claim, like, just claim more resources along the way as your blood flows through your body. So once you update your own consciousness and you work on your own problems, then that completely influences everything else, because now you can really set your target for accessing higher information in a more harmonious way. And so all of these people that are tuning into the reptilians or that are in all of these conspiracy theories, um, I'm not saying that it's always the case, but in most cases, I would say that the reason why they're doing that is because they haven't gone through the process that I've just gone through in reverse engineering themselves, clarifying their fears, for instance, like the fear of losing your house, the fear of losing your life, the fear of not having enough food or shelter, the fear of a revolution, a violent revolution or uprising, the fear of being controlled. All of these fears, all of these traumas, all of these problems, if you don't work on them, then if you once you enter higher informational or higher vibrational realms, they will completely distort the world that you're going to experience, because this information is the higher vibrations are just neutral. It's your consciousness that molds and processes all of that higher vibration, which is just pure potential of everything that can happen, and then that becomes your experience. So if you don't do the internal work, then the outer world is going to be your training field. So if you don't do the exercise of going to a psychologist and working on your own fears from the inside, then it's the outside that is going to be your psychotherapist, let's say. And that's not necessarily going to be more pleasant, let's say. Um, so yeah, just the last example, basically, it's once you get into more higher vibrational realms, or where there's more information accessible, um, it's the same at the micro level as at the macro level. Right now, for instance, as an individual, you have access to so many different things that you can do. For instance, you can go and buy weapons and start killing everyone in a very easy way, as you can see with all the shootings and stuff. Or you can also help so many people in so many different ways. In lower vibrations, it's much harder to do, to actually build a club and go out clubbing people and killing people is much harder. And it's also much harder to help people because there's just so many uh, so much less opportunities for doing that, because you have to physically go and help every single person on an individual basis. Whereas now, for instance, from the comfort of your home, you can send $100 to the other side of the world to help feed poor children. And I'm not saying it's better, or it's something that everybody has to do. It's just that um, it's something that you can do. And the more you work on your own consciousness and on your internal um, work, the more you can tune in to this kind of higher intuition, as I was discussing in the last video, for doing what's right in the present moment and knowing what to do with all of this new information that is available, in a way which is more harmonious, as opposed to good or bad, but more harmonious. Let's put it that way. So I hope you found this video interesting, and looking forward to the next one. Thanks.